Welcome to Deer Hound Productions. I'm DaneCat33, and today I'll be discussing the scariest thing in FNAF: themes. The newest Five Nights at Freddy's entry, Secret of the Mimic, was very story-driven, focusing on the tragedy of the Murray's lives. Something I haven't seen discussed is the game's themes commenting on marriage and what men thinks constitutes a good wife. These themes surround the character Fiona Murray and her robotic replacement, F10N4. In case you're unaware of this game's tragic story, then I'll briefly recap it. Feel free to skip ahead if you're already a devoted Mimic fan. Secret of the Mimic revolves around the Murray family, consisting of Edwin, Fiona, and their son, David. Edwin ran his family's factory, Murray's Costume Manor, which produced costumes, animatronics, and carnival games. Unfortunately, Edwin practically buried himself in his work, hardly spending any time with his family. This makes it very painful when Fiona dies in a fire at one of the Fall Fest events that MCM was helping with. To take care of David while he worked, Edwin made the Mimic, an animatronic endoskeleton with an AI program named M1, which would learn from mimicking what it sees. However, M1 either started to copy Fiona, or Edwin figured that he could use it to recreate her. Regardless, M1 evolves into an AI replica of Fiona, named F10N4. And Edwin fully accepts that this robot is his deceased wife. Right off the bat, replacing your wife with a robot is certainly an interesting and not at all in bad taste decision. But seriously, seeing your wife as something that can simply be replaced by a machine is pretty messed up. More on that later. For now, let's focus on the real woman. When Fiona is first introduced chronologically, we know she's a former puppeteer, and later we learn that she makes puppets. She's a very talented woman, but past David's first birthday, we don't see much of that. Instead, all we see is her taking care of Edwin, telling him to stop putting so much work on his employees and, maybe spend some time with his son, which he just brushes off, already giving us a good indication that maybe Edwin isn't the best husband. It's also really interesting to see all Fiona's creativity and promise just dissolve after she marries Edwin. And I've seen some arguments saying she just puts her own ambitions aside because she cares about Edwin and David, which I initially agreed with, but let's not forget the most important piece of the FNAF lore, the Cleanovac commercial. We can find this tape showcasing Edwin's vacuum during Secret of the Mimic, and this MCM commercial gives us a pretty good glimpse of how Edwin views the role of his wife.
Mom, you won't have to leave the kitchen for the house to be spotless.
So the problem isn't that Fiona willingly sets aside her ambitions to support her family. It's that it seems like Edwin views the role of a wife as someone who only takes care of her family. It doesn't seem like Fiona willingly abandoned all of her aspirations. It's more likely a result of Edwin forcing his views of what a good wife is upon her. It's also important to note that Edwin isn't just some raging misogynist who hates all women. He very clearly admires Fiona as a talented person, and messages even reveal that multiple MCM higher-ups such as Bev and Amy are women. So he definitely doesn't view them as lesser to men. And I'm not saying this to excuse Edwin or say he isn't a misogynist. While he's not outwardly hateful towards women, his views of a wife are absolutely rooted in misogyny. I think it's important to know how even well-seeming men can harbor misogynistic views, even if they don't extend to every woman that they meet. The issue is specifically how he views the role of a wife in the family. It's like he stops seeing Fiona as a person after they get married, and instead, she's just his wife. We see this starting with David's first birthday. Edwin is playing with Fiona's Roxy puppet, and he accidentally makes David cry. She tells him to stop, but he just brushes off her concerns and keeps inadvertently terrorizing his son. Then on David's second birthday, he's too busy working to spend time with his child. And when Fiona tells him to get out and join the party, he just ignores her. Edwin really does not care what she thinks after they get married, further adding to how he stops seeing Fiona as a person. We see this even further in MCM's Stage Manager software. This storytelling technology was designed by Edwin to automate the process of running a puppet show, replacing all the writers, crew, and most notably puppeteers, which is exactly what Fiona's job was. It definitely seems like Edwin views Fiona, and by extension her job, as something lesser and easily replaceable. Which leads into our next topic, the Robo-Fiona replacement, F10N4. When Edwin remakes Fiona, essentially her entire job is just to take care of David and make dinner. All that creativity we saw in Fiona is entirely gone. She never makes any puppets or does anything outside of taking care of her son and husband. Edwin also has a line where he tells F10N4 to go make dinner, which again, paired with that line from the Cleanovac commercial, really shows how Edwin views the role of his wife. Pretty much everything F10N4 does is for her family. Even when David dies, as far as we can tell, she doesn't seem to spend any time grieving, instead getting right to convincing Edwin to make another mimic to bring David back. F10N4 pours herself entirely into her family, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but again, it seems to be more of a result of how Edwin sees the role of a wife, rather than F10N4's genuine intent. Since Edwin created her, we can reasonably assume that all of her behavior and goals are directly from him. The only time we ever see F10 doing something remotely creative is later in the story when she designs the MXES computer, which is designed to keep the violent replica of David, known as M2, safe and hidden from the world. Once again though, she only does this to further serve her family, unlike Fiona, who is creative and talented prior to marrying Edwin. Furthermore, it also seems like she was booted out of the endoskeleton body to make way for M2 to develop in the world, literally sacrificing her own body for her son. Speaking of which, after learning that M2 has become violent, F10's entire focus becomes obtaining the Mimic schematics so she can send them to Edwin to help him repair M2. If you want to learn more about Secret of the Mimic, then I'd recommend checking out our Five Nights at Freddy's timeline video. But focusing on F10's role in the story, everything she's doing is just to help her family. And to reiterate, it's perfectly reasonable for a mom to want to take care of her family. But what is disturbing is how this seems to be because of Edwin's views of his wife's role. We even see that F10 is still in love with Edwin after being repeatedly abandoned by him.
Stop talking like her. You're not her. I never want to hear or even think about you ever again. Ever!
Edwin abandoned us. He shut himself away in our home.
Again, this is likely because Edwin created F10 as an obedient wife. Fiona's entire identity is just stripped away, reduced to a machine to take care of Edwin and his son. I think this could even explain the MXES entity's behavior in Ruin. This one is more of spitballing, but I've always found it interesting how when F10 is the MXES entity, she lacks almost all of her character. And for everyone saying that MXES isn't F10 they're pretty clearly the same computer. We even type 4625 into the machine in Help 1 and 2, which is the same frequency that F10 talked on in one of Edwin's recordings. The F10 sun face even matches up with the MXES entity's face, both being very sharp. Same with the security nodes. As pointed out by Twitter user Star, if you arrange all the possible node formations, you get the exact same sun ray pattern that's highlighted by green on F10. So running off the idea that these two are the same, what's interesting about F10's MXES is how they never talk or have much personality, which is especially interesting after seeing F10's more deceptive and talkative behavior in Secret of the Mimic. Sure, you could argue that her behavior in Ruin is simply to avoid spoiling the future installment, but I think it could be seen as an indicator of F10's character at this point. After years of trying to repair and protect M2, she's been reduced to the mindless drive to protect her family, which I think makes Fiona's character progression even more tragic. She starts as a bright, talented woman, but ends up as an AI program replicating her, lacking any sort of humanity. All that's left of her is Edwin's views of his wife, a person whose only purpose is to take care of her family. I think it makes MXES a much more tragic character. If you also think the Mimic is glitch trap, then you could even argue that F10 taking on a rabbit persona represents how obsessed she is with her family, to the point where she even mimics her son's appearance. Now, am I reading too much into this? Maybe, but it's worth noting that this isn't the first time Five Nights at Freddy's has discussed gender dynamics. Ironically enough, one of the most meme stories in the series has a major focus on how men view women. And that story is in the flesh. Yes, the Mpreg one. Just bear with me here. This Fazbear Frights entry follows Matt, a video game developer and more importantly, a misogynist. He didn't want his wife to get pregnant because he argued it'd ruin her attractive body. And he tells a woman that he meets on a dating app that it looks like she's put on 25 pounds since she took her profile picture. Then the story ends with him giving birth to a baby Springtrap, who was born from the game he was working on. Sure, this is weird, but it's supposed to be ironic how a man who looks down upon women has to experience the pregnancy that he was so against his wife having. Crazy story, yeah, but it shows that FNAF isn't a stranger to themes regarding sexism. So it's very likely that most of these details relating to Fiona and F10 were intentional. Fiona goes from being an actual person with talents and aspirations, to a wife that Edwin only sees as someone to take care of him and David. Then following her death, Edwin replaces his wife with a machine, who again just takes care of the family, with no trace of the creative woman that she's mimicking. By the time of Ruin, F10 is fully invested in protecting M2, lacking any semblance of the humanity that she was clinging onto in Secret of the Mimic. What's next for her journey is a mystery, but much like M2, I don't think she can be saved. She really only exists to serve her family. If M2 is defeated, then I'm not sure what would happen to her then. Her goal for decades has been to protect her robot son. If he dies, which after Secret of the Mimic seems like the route we're heading, then I don't know what she would do. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things turn out. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and joining our monthly membership. It helps support us, and you get a bunch of cool perks like shoutouts in our videos, custom emojis, badges next to your name, exclusive looks at upcoming projects, and more. Special thanks to our current member Shaun, and thanks to you for watching. Be sure to check out some of our other videos.